Bearded dragons, one of the most popular pet reptiles that we have here in the hobby with pretty straightforward care. However, for some reason, when we talk about how to care for the bearded dragon, the information can be pretty controversial. So I want to take today to debunk some of that bad info that's out there right now and really just make a care guide that is up to date without any misinformation. So with that intro out of the way, let's dive into how to care for a bearded dragon. Before we start, just to add a little backstory about me, I've been keeping bearded dragons for a little over 5 years now and have made sure that I am up to date with all the info that I have to make sure that my dragon has everything he needs and everything he's going to want to thrive. So today we'll be going over the 5 main points of how to care for a bearded dragon. That's going to be enclosure size, heating and humidity, lighting, diet, and then what to fill the enclosure with. So let's start with number 1, enclosure size. Now when you're picking an enclosure size for a bearded dragon, we'll be starting with, what to do with a baby and then all the way to an adult. So when starting with a baby, you're going to want something anywhere from a 20-gallon to 40-gallon enclosure. I firmly believe a 20-gallon for a baby bearded dragon is the bare minimum that you can give. I don't believe in putting something in a 10-gallon, especially with bearded dragons with the temperatures that you're going to be needing. It's wicked hard to get a temperature gradient in that size of an enclosure. After your bearded dragon has outgrown that 20-gallon enclosure, you can do a middle step, which would be, say, like a 20-gallon to a 40-gallon, and then the adult size. However, I believe, if he's outgrown the 20-gallon enclosure, you can just put him straight in the adult enclosure and save yourself a few bucks without putting that extra step in there of the 40-gallon. And then, of course, that adult minimum enclosure needing to be a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. Now, I know there is some information still out there about bearded dragons being able to live as an adult in a 40-gallon. However, I do not agree with that at all. I made a video a while back, the 5 bearded dragon myths, and that was one of them. If you're looking at a 40-gallon enclosure, that's only going to be 36 inches by 18 inches wide. With bearded dragons, of course, growing usually over 18 inches, they're not even going to have enough space to turn around, which is why I just don't agree with them being rightfully, able to live in a 40-gallon as an adult. I think the 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot method is a great minimum that we've, slowly tried to outdate from the 40-gallon enclosure. This is giving the dragon at least double the amount of space in length as the dragon is long, and then making it wide enough so he can completely turn around without, rubbing the tail or his snout on anything. But you can always go larger. Personally, for me, I went with the 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot option from AP Cages. It was only about 120 bucks more, so I figured he would really enjoy the extra space. Now, moving on to number 2, we are going to be getting into heat and humidity. Now, this is where I see a lot of misinformation getting there. Doing a quick Google search, you'll see anywhere from basking temps needing to be 95 to 100 to anywhere up to the 120s. Now, I think this is where a lot of people lose their mark when they're first getting the hobby and learning about husbandry. A lot of people are just thinking, if we just need to hit this certain number on this certain spot and then we're good to go. When I think we need to go a lot more indulged into it and really go into more temperature gradient than just section a basking spot. So for me personally, I took all of those numbers. In my enclosure, I have 3 separate light sockets for heat bulbs where I use a multiple of variety of low wattage floodlights, where I obtain basking temps anywhere from at the highest point 120 to the lowest point 100. And what this does is it lets the dragon choose on what temperature he wants to bask. I see this animal basking on anywhere from the highest being the 120 or just hanging out in the lower end of the 100 degrees. Heat is a big thing that we're missing with bearded dragons, and it's kind of gotten to the point where they've begun to develop a stereotype of bearded dragons being lazy and not really moving around. However, that's not the truth. Putting a dragon on a naturalistic substrate with heat that's actually high enough to where they need it, you'll find your dragon a lot more motivated and not just sitting at its basking spot 24/7. Now, if we're looking about how bearded dragons act in the wild, they're only basking for a certain amount of time. It's not an all-day thing. It's just a quick heat up to where they're going back to any of their shelters, the caves, into rocks, bushes, trees, things like that. And diving into part 2 of this, we'll be talking a little bit about humidity, where there really isn't much to go on about. Now, as far as humidity goes for bearded dragons, they are an arid species to where the humidity does not need to be high. Average humidity for these guys can range anywhere from 30 to 50%. Now, this is usually the average humidity that you would find in your household, so there really isn't nothing that you need to monitor too much about to the point where you need to worry about, missing the enclosure or, watering the substrate like you would in, say, like New Caledonian geckos. No, all in all, the humidity is actually the easiest part about owning a bearded dragon, but let's move over from that and talk about number 3. Then of course, number 3, we are going to be talking about lighting. Now when I talk about lighting, I kind of made it a broad generality, but really we're going to be mostly focusing on UVB for your bearded dragon. On top of you needing your heat lights, whether that be, floodlights or the reptile basking bulbs that you get at the pet shop, you're also going to be needing special lighting called UVB. The UVB bulbs come in a variety of different ways, such as the coiled, the compact, and then of course the tube lightings, and even the tube lightings are going to be going in sizes like T8s and T5s, and I'll break those down a little bit right now. So as far as the first 2 options that I mentioned, you're not going to be really wanting them. Maybe as a very temporary spot, you can use the compact bulbs, and until you can afford or get the tube lighting. I would not use it as a permanent solution. Just the amount of UVB you're getting versus the enclosure size is not going to be adequate. Then if we're talking about the tube lighting, we'll be going into T8s versus T5s. The really main difference is the sizes of them. The T8s are going to be a wider and larger bulb, where the T5s are more skinny. The big difference between these two are it is recommended for the T8 that you put it, or somehow get it inside the enclosure instead of outside the enclosure, due to the fact that the T8 does not have the ability to penetrate the screen as well as the T5s. Now, while the T5s do have the ability to penetrate through the screen, I usually just recommend putting it inside the enclosure anyway. If you do get a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, you're probably going to be either custom ordering one or building a wooden or PVC, some side of enclosure where it's not going to be screen on top. As far as the UVB percentage goes, I always recommend the 10.0 if you're going with Zoomed, or the 10 to 12% if you're going with Arcadia. If you are doing, as I recommend, the 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, that is 2 foot in height, and so you're going to need something where the rays drove down just a little bit more than, say, like the 5.0. Now, as far as what size tube lighting you're going to want for your enclosure, you're going to want it to cover at least 50% of the tank in size. Just for a personal example, for my 6 foot long enclosure, I have a 36-inch T5 bulb that is the Zoomed 10.0. Now we'll be moving on to number 3, which is going to be diet for your bearded dragon. Now, when we're talking about the diet for the bearded dragon, I am a strong believer that variety is the key. So, just personally, when I'm feeding my bearded dragon, I give him a variety of insects ranging from crickets, dubia roaches, superworms, mealworms, waxworms, phoenix worms, calci worms, the list goes on with bugs. With bearded dragons being omnivores, you are going to have to supplement with greens on top of crickets. These greens can be anywhere from collard greens, dandelion greens, broccoli, carrots, apples, blueberries. I'm sure you can find, there's probably some lists out there, maybe I'll put one right here, of, safe veggies and greens and fruits that you can feed your bearded dragon. As far as the ratio goes between feeding insects and greens, that's really going to depend on the age of the bearded dragon. As the bearded dragon is young, it's going to require more protein and more energy that you're going to be getting from, the bugs and the crickets, things like that, versus the greens. However, when it gets older, they start to, go down a little more as far as the energy level, and you can really supplement more with your greens, fruits, and veggies instead of the insects. Now, moving on to our final topic, we are going to be talking about number 5, what to fill your enclosure with. Now, when we're talking about what to fill the enclosure with, we'll be going from the bottom up. So what substrates is best to use, the amount of things to use, such as like branches, rocks, backgrounds, things like this. And we'll start with the floor of being what to add. So when deciding what substrate to use when putting into your enclosure, there is a lot of controversy around it. There are people that go for the sterile setup and believe that's right, and there are people that go with the bioactive setup and believe that is the one and only way. However, it's all up to personal opinion. Both have their pros and cons, and I'm not here to tell you, what's the right way and what's the wrong way, I'm just here to give an opinion. So, personally, as I've said before, I'm a huge advocate for bioactive, and that does not diminish with the bearded dragon. He's also in a bioactive enclosure. The substrate mix I'm using right now is a mixture of compactor clay, Scott's topsoil, and play sand. And then, of course, I just have a few different of the cleanup crew, that being springtails, some purple isopods, superworm beetles, superworms, mealworms, and their beetles, and then also some earthworms to aerate the soil for the plants. I would say when looking at, for the bearded dragon substrate is do your research. As far as impaction goes, as far as you have proper husbandry, your bearded dragon is not going to get impacted on loose substrate. Of course, I made a few videos on this so you guys can watch in the channel. I'll probably try to link something right here. But yeah, do your research and, just come to your own conclusion on what substrate you think is best for your Now, when we're talking about other things to fill the enclosure with, it really comes up to you. Personally, for me, I've used branches from outside, cork bark, and then I've actually made a custom background for my bearded dragon's enclosure that gives different ledges, so he has different levels that he can climb up on and, you know, just lay down and relax on. I believe bearded dragons to be actually semi-arboreal. In the wild, you can find them a lot, you know, somewhat up in trees, on fence posts, you know, in Australia, things like that, and I believe you should implement that in captive care. So with that being said, I've made sure that my dragon has a lot of different places that he can climb, go under, burrow into, and just, you know, all the 3 things to give a little more mental stimulation, some natural enrichment. And there you have it, guys, the 5 main things you're going to be needing in order to take care of your bearded dragon. Now, let me know in the comment section how I did in this video. Do you guys like it? Do you think I got it all right? Are there some things I got wrong? You know, let me know in the comment section. Other than that, if you liked the video, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of my animals or breeding products, you can always follow me on Instagram or Facebook at DBCB Exotics. And other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.